to start with, I'll just say I always try more to convey an experience than share concepts. And that's what I hope to do this morning as well. I think we have a lot of ideas about spirituality, and there's a lot of interesting facts and historical anecdotes that we can talk about with regard to any spiritual tradition, including the various Bhakti traditions. But more important than any of those facts or anecdotes or concepts is our embodied experience. And this is especially true with Bhakti, because Bhakti is not an idea. Bhakti doesn't exist on the ideological, intellectual plane. It is an experience. And I think of yoga as a set of practices that supports a path toward a state of being. So I apply that idea to like any of the yoga paths, and it applies to Bhakti as well. So I'm just fixing my video there. Yeah, it applies to Bhakti as well. It's a path, it's a set of practices. So it's, there's things to do. There's, in the various Bhakti texts, they talk about kirtana, singing. They talk about smarana, remembering. They talk about puja, worshiping, archana, different approaches, things that can be done along the way as part of the practice of bhakti. But the practices only really have meaning in the context of the path, the journey, the yatra, the movement, the evolution, the growing, the awakening, right? The practices done without that purpose, it could be anything. We can sing any sorts of songs, but when we sing a song that is with the purpose of growing in our realization of who we are and who the divine is, then it takes on a different meaning, purpose, flavor, action. And this path is leading to a place. It's not just a random path meandering through the forest that might end up anywhere. It's a path that leads toward a state. And when we're talking about yoga in general, it's a path that leads toward the state of yoga, the state of union, the state of alignment of all the different aspects of myself, my physical self, my emotional self, my mental self, my spiritual being, the depth of my soul, the spark of divinity that is the essence of creation that lives in me. All of these are aligned, and they're aligned from the top down. So that, every orientation when it comes to spirituality is somewhat relative. There's no top, there's no bottom, there's no up, there's no down, there's no, higher and lower. But for the sake of articulation, we can say that the deepest essence of my soul, the spark of divinity that was created at the beginning of time, that has manifested itself in the uniqueness of me, I want to align all the other layers of myself with that, so that my embodied being is transparent to that radiance. That's the state of yoga. And the state of yoga involves and implicitly includes union with the divine, union with that spark of creativity. And the spark, in the Western tradition, we think of God as creating stuff. In the Eastern traditions, the idea more is that God is the stuff. God becomes this manifestation. God becomes duality and multiplicity. And so when the actual reality, so this is the thing about yoga. Yoga isn't an artifice. It's not putting on something. It's not a show. It's not an alteration of reality. It is the embodiment of reality as it is. What we're living in now is the confusion and delusion of separateness and isolation. That's the illusion. That's the falsehood. The reality is the oneness. So in the path of yoga, we're moving towards the state of reality that already is. that we already are, that already exists, the substratum of all experience and reality is oneness. And yet we are not, in an embodied way, living in that oneness. The earth is not in a state of, the earth is in a state of duality, in a state of multiplicity, in a state of confusion. And so we each individually and collectively and the earth as a whole are all along this path moving towards this state, which is the fundamental state of reality, Sat, the underlying being, the underlying reality, Ritam, the truth. So the context of this particular talk today, Bhakti in the subjective age. So I was thinking about this, what is the subjective? What does it mean? We use words, right? And Sri Aurobindo uses lots of words, and lots of words that are, to our modern ear, a bit complicated, or, they're hard to understand. Subjective. What does it mean to embody subjectivity? What does it mean for me to be my subjective self? To know who I am. So I don't experience myself as an object. I don't experience my body as an object. I don't experience my emotional being, my heart, my emotions as objects. I don't experience my mind, my thoughts, my ideas, my beliefs as objects. There's not a separation there between me and these aspects of myself. Everything is one. Everything is subject. This is again in alignment with the state of yoga. So subjectivity is embodiment. There's a teacher of embodiment named Thomas Hanna who coined a word in the 70s, I think, he used the word soma. It's interesting because that's a word that appears in the Rig Veda. He used it in a different kind of way. The word soma that he used was to describe the body experiencing itself as a subject, as opposed to an object, as opposed to me looking at my arm and saying, that's my arm, this thing that's attached to me. And, what's me? I don't even really know. But each of these pieces of my body are individually attached to me somehow. They're like glued on. And Thomas Hanna said, no, it's possible actually to experience the body, for the body to experience itself as a subject. This is where we get the word somatics, somaticization. Somatics is the supporting practices and techniques that support the experience of subjectivity in the body. Embodiment. And the body is this is the material layer. This is the base layer. We can also apply this to emotions so that our emotional being, we can experience as something that we're grappling with. Emotions come and they knock us off our feet and they're difficult and painful, and then we go up and down. Or we can experience a unification and integration of our emotional being so that it becomes subjective. I know who I am. I know the emotions that are me. And increasingly, the emotions that are me, the emotions of peace, love, compassion, generosity, humility, sincerity, aspiration, these natural organic emotions that are seated in me as part of my uniqueness, these emotions become my subjectivity. This is what I experience. And other emotions that pull in a different direction towards the experience of isolation, depression, despair, fear, anxiety, these emotions that partake of isolation and separatism, not yoga, anti-yogic emotions, let's say, they become less and less prominent until at the peak of subjectivity, they disappear. The same goes for the mind. We can experience the mind as these random thoughts that pull in the direction of separatism, isolation, objectification, or we can experience the mind as the truth shining through us, the pure radiance of Saraswati, the pure radiance of inspiration, shining from the divine, pouring down into us, transparently flowing out. Now, of course, this state of yoga this state of subjectivity is not necessarily where we all find ourselves right now. And so we are on a path of awakening, a path of self-realization. We are on a path towards this destination. And the same goes with bhakti in the case of, or in the context of subjectivity. The bhakti can be an instrument, a support for us along the path of self-realization, along as we realize in deeper and deeper and more embodied ways, in more full ways, who we are and what we are and what what the reality of our existence is. Bhakti can be a support for that. And it progresses. There's this kind of continuum from separative isolation to oneness, unity consciousness. And in between, there's a whole range of experiences. And the bhakti can be separative, extractive bhakti. We could say, I worship God so I can get something. We have this sense, Sri Aurobindo really articulates this about the Vedas. If you read the Rig Veda Samhita, it is a bhakti text. I mean, the first word, Agni mi ile, I adore Agni. That's the pinnacle of bhakti. I adore the radiance of the flame, the being of the flame. When I look into the fire, the being that I see dancing there, my experience is adoration. We say, Prano Devi Saraswati, come to us, Devi Saraswati, please bless us. We say, Tat Savitur Varenyam, the original Gayatri, Tat Savitur Varenyam. That Savitri, that radiant, magnificent Savitri. I mean, these are bhakti phrases. These are not ideas. These are expressions of adoration. Triambakam yajamahe, sugandhim pushtivardhanam. The yajamahe, we praise, we honor, we Sri Aurobindo likes the word laud, which has kind of lost its meaning for most of us in the modern English context. We praise, we adore the three-eyed one who pervades the universe like a sweet scent. It's like if you have incense burning in the corner of the room, it fills the room. So you smell it. That's the experience. The divine is that. The divine is pervading the universe. And can we smell it? Do we notice it? Can we detect it sensorially, the experience of the living divine inhabiting this cosmos, this space, this earth, this room, this body? We experience empty space around ourselves. The divine is full in that empty space all the time. So the illusion is the empty space. The reality is the fullness of the divine, which pervades the space like a sweet scent. Trayambakam yajamhe sugandhim pushtivardhanam. This is a phrase, a mantra that invokes that experience, which is an experience of bhakti. Gananam tva ganapati havamhe. Like the Lord of all the devas, the Lord of all qualities, the Lord of all the fates. We worship you, havamahe. So the Rig Veda is full of worship. It's probably harder to find passages that are not all about bhakti, devotion, adoration, and worship than phrases that are. And yet, there was an accretion of ritualism. There was an accretion of, during the development of the Brahmanas, which came after the Samhita, and during the rise of the Brahmin caste as the intermediary between the human and the divine, which happens in religions all over the world. The priestly caste comes and says, I can introduce you to my friend God, but it's going to cost you. And you have to know, I know these really special things. I went to school for a long time. I learned all these rituals and mantras and stuff. You don't know those. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Just, give me some cash and I'll hook you up. That is what happened. What seems to have happened with the Vedas. There was an understanding, the relationship of the collective to the Vedic mystic mantras and texts became ritualistic and extractive. So then we have people going to Vedic ceremonies for the purpose of getting something. This is extractive bhakti. It's bhakti, but it's objective, it's abstractive. God is out there, it's transactional. God is doing something for me. That's one end of the spectrum. And then as we move along, we come to experience more and more relationship with the divine, relationship with each other, relationship with the earth. And it's progressive, and it moves in phases. And there are individual beings throughout the course of time who embodied subjective, kind of radiant fullness of subjective bhakti that we can look to as like, what would that be like, right? What are we headed towards? What's the possibility that is available to us? And just see if that helps with the lighting. So along this continuum that we're moving, we can imagine, we can kind of have a sense of ourselves anywhere along that continuum. And maybe we go up and down and back and forth at different times, but we're moving. And we're moving over thousands of years, so we can't say, today to tomorrow. This is lifetimes and lifetimes and millennia that this evolution is taking place. So a big movement within a given lifetime is a big movement. And it sometimes doesn't look like sometimes we feel like, oh, I wish I was moving faster. We have that sense in yoga in general. Wow, man, why I'm so, why am I so limited? Why am I so incapable? Why do I still experience things like this, such duality, such limitation? Interestingly, in the Krishna Bhakti tradition, there's a sense that, who was it that? No, it's actually in Narada's Bhakti Sutras. He says, Narada defines bhakti as remembering God and being, and this is a rough translation, being upset when we forget. Feeling, I forget the word that's used, the Sanskrit word, but feeling remorse, feeling regret, feeling pain when we forget God. That is bhakti. So it's not like that's not bhakti. We overlay shame onto it. I should be. But he's saying, no, that is the experience of bhakti, is being devoted and aspiring, longing to know and remember God all the time, every second, every moment. And being full of remorse and regret when we forget. Because we forget, because that's part of life and part of living in this confusing state of duality that we're living in right now. So this is the part of being on a path, is that we're not there yet, right? We're not there yet. We have the ritualistic extractive bhakti, we have relational and grateful bhakti. Thank you, divine being, for the blessings of my life. And how can I serve you better? And what can I do to, what can I do to more manifest your radiance in this world? And then there's the dissolved unity of oneness, the dissolved unity of the oneness of being, where there is no other anymore. And the one becomes the divine being, the embodied experience, the subjective experience is complete, and the radiance of the divine is completely transparently capable of flowing through the prism of the personality, the prism of the surface self. And what does that look like? What does that look like? Well, we can look at Ramakrishna. Paramahansa Ramakrishna used to complain to Kali when she swept him up into the state of non-duality. He would get absorbed into samadhi He would lose all consciousness of self and other and be absorbed into a complete state of unification with the Divine Mother. And then he would come out and say, why did you do that? Why did you do that? I want to worship you. I want to love you. I want to bow at your feet. I want to be in relationship with you. So he's moving back and forth between non-duality and duality, the experience of non-duality and duality. And his emotional experience is, I want to stay with you. You're so beautiful and radiant. I want to be with you forever. Ramana Maharshi, the kind of penultimate advocate of non-duality, who said, who am I, who am I? You know, the only practice you need is to say, who am I, who am I, who am I? Continually ask, who am I? Until you realize that everything that you think you are, everything that you experience yourself to be, all your beliefs and preferences and, you know, ideas, none of that is actually you. And eventually, when you've exhausted yourself, the true self will shine through, right? So this is Ramana Maharshi's teaching, complete non-duality. Everything is Maya except for this. Everything is confusion and delusion except for that one. He wrote a song called the Aksharamanam Malai, 108 verses to Arunachala. And he wrote it in Tamil. And apparently, the story about how it came about is that his disciples were asking him to write a song. He would always recite poetry and songs from different traditions. And his disciples had been asking him to write a song, and he kept saying, no, no, no. And then one day, and you know, this is where it becomes a bit unbelievable, but mystical in the story. One day he circumambulated Arunachala and he composed 108 verses on that circumambulation. And these verses are incredible. It's like, you know, he's singing it. First of all, it's a marriage garland of letters. That's what Aksharamanam Malai means. It's a marriage. It's like this song that he wrote is a marriage garland that he is asking Arunachala to put on him. He is singing to Arunachala as his beloved, as his betrothed. And he says things like, you know, you brought me here. I was just minding my own business at home, and you dragged me all the way away from my family and my life, and you brought me here, and now you hide from me, and you're going to ruin my reputation, and you're going to ruin your reputation. Nobody's going to love you anymore. I mean, it's like intimate. It's like a serial. It's like a drama, you know. And he's calling out to Arunachala like this, to the mountain, to Shiva, to the radiance that is Arunachala, the divine radiance of Shiva that embodies as the mountain. He's crying out. So this is somebody who embodies, I mean, his teachings in a way. He's known as somebody who teaches this very Gyan yoga, this very intellectual, abstract yoga that is not at all about bhakti. And yet he embodies this devotion, this love. So he has realized himself. He has realized his subjective being. And yet he is still madly in love with madly, dramatically, emotionally in love with the divine being. Neem Karoli Baba, who was worshipped by, you know, many thousands of devotees, and we know some in the West from Ram Dass and that kind of group of people describing their experiences with him. He would chant Ram, 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 Ram. He would write letters to Ram Dass that was just Ram written all over and over and over and over again. He would listen to Kirtan. He would listen to Hanuman Chalisa and Govinda Hare, Gopala Hare, people singing, and he would cry. And, you know, so he's realized himself. He's realized himself as the cosmos. He's realized himself as the cosmos to the point where he can manipulate time and space and create mystical conditions. He can be two places at once. You know, he can manipulate the fabric of the cosmos. That's how much he realizes that he is that. And yet he still is in absolute love with Ram, with the divine, with Krishna, with the beloved. Kanapa Nayanar is one of the 64 Siddha, Tamil Siddhas. He found a linga in the forest, and he had no context for understanding what a Shiva linga was. So he worshipped it the only way he knew how. He would put water in his mouth and spit the water out to clean it off. And he would offer the linga. He was a hunter, and he ate meat and would offer the meat to the linga. And some priests came along and were absolutely horrified by seeing, he's like cleaning it with his feet and spitting on it and offering, meat to it. And there was a time when blood started oozing out of the eye in the linga. And Kanapa, as his name implies, took his spear and gouged out his own eye and put it onto the eye of the linga. That this absolute devotion on the physical level, self-sacrifice, self-giving, self-offering on that level. This is what subjective bhakti is. It's like, it's no longer me in relation to the divine. It's the divine is everything. Everything is the divine. There's no separation. And so I don't think of myself as a separate object or a separate being with its own needs that need to be met. It's an experience of the only thing that there is God, and everything is that. And this is the promise. I had a verse from Savitri up on my other computer before I had to switch, but it's the same. Aswapati is another one. Aswapati went through ranges of experienced all the different dimensions of reality, came all the way up to the great extinction of total nirvana. And then the Divine Mother comes. Then she arrives. Then all he wants is to join himself completely with her and allow the radiance of her divinity to pour through him and bless the earth. This is all he wants. His being becomes a single pointed spire of aspiration to join with her and become a transmitter, a channel for her divine radiance to bless the earth. And of course, the mother herself in her prayers and meditations writes exquisitely about devotion to the divine and her experience in such intimate words, of the divine being. Let me be completely surrendered to you. Let there be no more me and you. And yet I wait like a child with no expectation, like a peacefully flowing stream I wait for you. I wait for you. There's a temple in Kanchipuram. It's of the 5 Shiva temples in South India devoted to the 5 elements. It's the one devoted to earth. And the story of the Ekambareshvara, the Lord of the one mango tree, is that under this mango tree, Parvati sat worshipping a linga made of sand, worshipping Shiva in the form of a linga made of sand. And as a test, Shiva sent, or maybe Vishnu, I can't remember who did it, who was testing her, maybe it was Vishnu, sent a flood and a windstorm and a cyclone and a fire and, all these ways to destroy this linga. The flood would wash over it and the windstorm would blow it down and the rainstorm would destroy it. And she just wrapped herself around this linga and protected it with all of her being, with all of her, and she waited for Shiva. She waited for Shiva. She was protecting this linga and waiting for the one. In the midst of all the distractions and all the impending doom and all the terrible catastrophes that were falling upon her, she waited patiently, perseveringly, eternally for her beloved. And the mother has that same quality in prayers and meditations. I wait for you. I'm not going to try to rush you. I'm not going to demand that you come here now, but I do nothing but wait for you, wait for your touch, wait for you to come and fill me and activate my purpose. And of course, prayers and meditation was written in the 1910 to 1915, something like that. So this was at the beginning, and you might say, of the activation of the mother's purpose. And the embodiment of her spiritual purpose in her life on earth was to be fulfilled in much more outward ways later on. So she's anticipating that and calling that into being in these prayers. And yet there's a sense in the prayers that she has a subjective realization. She knows who she is. She knows who she is. She's not confused about who she is. This is the possibility of bhakti in the subjective age. And bhakti isn't just, the life of Krishna, as described in the Bhagavata Purana, gives us this view on bhakti. Krishna is the child of the mother. So there's the love of the mother for the child. It's called Vatsalya Bhakti, the love for the baby cow, the love of the mother cow for the baby cow. Yashoda, who's his adoptive mother, loves him so deeply. And she loves him in a way she doesn't know who he is. And there's a moment where she opens up his mouth to get something out of it, and she looks in and she sees the whole cosmos, and she's just like, oh my God, who is this? What is this? I see everything there. And then Krishna wipes her memory and says, no, you can't know that. You got to be my mom right now. So that devotion, the poignant devotion of the mother for the child, that is bhakti. When the mother knows, we could say subjectively, when the mother knows that what she sees in her child is the divine. When the friend knows, when I look into my friend's eyes and I know that what I'm seeing there is God, the divine manifesting, the divine that hides within the soul of all beings and that shines through when there's an opening. When I look at my beloved and I see the divine there, I see God there. When I look at my parents and I see God there. When I look at a tree, when I look at, like Krishna's life, he was beloved by his friends. He was beloved by the gopis. He was beloved by his parents. He was beloved by Arjuna. There's all these episodes of his life that demonstrate what this exchange of bhakti, the rasa of bhakti is in all different configurations. These configurations are around us all the time. So when we lean towards the subjective experience of bhakti, we lean towards the realization that God is everywhere, in everything, in everyone, even in the midst of calamity, catastrophe, delusion, confusion, falsehood, false narratives, people blustering and tearing things apart. Even in the midst of that, the divine is in everything and in everyone. And there are anti-divine forces, of course, anti-evolutionary forces, anti-yogic forces that are pulling in the opposite direction, that are influencing people's thoughts and their behaviors and their ideas and their beliefs. Those forces are there, they're real and they're active, but at the base of it, the person who's being influenced is a soul, is an incarnation, a manifestation of the divine radiance. Can we see that anyway? Can we see through even what they think of themselves, even what they believe about themselves? Can we see through that to that divine radiance? That's the opportunity. That's what it means to lean into an experience of subjective bhakti. It means to see the earth herself as a living, conscious, evolving being who loves us. And gravity isn't some force, some empty physical calculation. Gravity is the earth holding us against her. Gravity is the love of the mother holding us against her. Photosynthesis is not some chemical process. Photosynthesis is the trees loving the sun, praying to the sun, adoring the sun, and transforming that adoration into sustenance for themselves. So we have this sense of our world in this objective way where we think of everything as materialistic and empty of purpose and empty of love. But actually the opposite is true. Everything is full of love. And the embodiment of bhakti is just tapping into that vibration. It's not creating something. It's not making something up. It's not a falsification. It's tapping into the fundamental underlying reality, Sat, the conscious Sat-chit, the self-aware, subjective self-aware reality, Sat-chit, Ananda. And Ananda, it has all these different ways of being understood. In our modern world, Sri Aurobindo uses the word delight, the delight of being. Delight is love. Love is delight. The delight of a child when they're playing hide and seek and they find the other person. Whoo! That delight. That's the delight of self-realization. That's the archetype for what we experience when we wake up to who we are. Wow, look, I found myself. Oh my God, that was amazing. The joy, that is Ananda. And that is the divine one is in a constant, continual, infinite state of that Ananda, because it doesn't forget who it is. We forget, we remember, we forget, we remember, and we oscillate back and forth. And eventually we come to a greater, deepened, more embodied sense of remembering, capacity for remembering. This is the path of bhakti. This is the progression along the path of bhakti. We have this relationship with ourselves, with each other, with the earth, and with the divine. And we have a continuum of separated from ourselves, separated from each other, combative, in competition for limited resources, wanting something from the divine, wanting something from the earth, extracting resources from the earth without gratitude, without honoring, without reverence. And then we move along the continuum, recognizing that the divine is in every being, recognizing that the earth is a living being, and everything that we take from her, we are taking from ourselves. Everything that we extract without responding. I mean, we're learning now in a very physical way about the consequences of extractive relationship with the earth. But it's not just the physical consequences. We are desecrating our own selves when we don't thank the earth, when we don't reverence and worship and adore the earth for what she constantly, unceasingly provides to us. The infiniteness of her love and nurturance. And the divine, of course. Our relationship to the divine can be characterized by extraction, and it can be characterized by oneness and unity and love. And I would say that in addition to what I've spoken about as far as adoration and the adoration of Ramana Maharshi for Arunachala, the adoration of Neem Karoli Baba for Ram, the adoration of Aswapati, of the Divine Mother, the adoration of the Mother for the Divine, the adoration of Ramakrishna for Kali. In addition to this adoration, another quality of subjective bhakti is self-giving. And I've alluded to this a few times, but just to say more clearly, when there is no self but the self, there is no self to protect. When there is no other, there is no possibility of giving oneself away. When I am infinite, I can't run out. When my love is infinite, it can't run out. And so the experience of subjective bhakti, the need to self-protect is gone. Because the container of the ego that creates the experience of separation and lack is gone. Once we're subjectively aware of who we are, the ego is like a vessel. It's like something that is waiting around to be used a tool that's waiting around to be used in the appropriate way, but it's not asserting itself. It's not enforcing or imposing a sense of limitation. It's like a vessel for the divine. You can see a cup filled with water, and you can know that the water is not actually limited by the cup. The cup's just a container. But within the container of the ego, we often feel as if our water is just completely separate from all the other water. And it's not really actually a part of other water. It's just what it is. It's just what we experience it to be in its individual separation. So the subjective bhakti is the realization that all that is inside of me is the same all that is inside of everything. And so there's no need to protect mine. There's no need to hoard mine. There's no need to look out for mine. There's just a will to offer myself to the divine, to the wholeness, and not offer myself to smallness, not to say to somebody who has a distorted perception of reality, you can direct where my love goes. You can direct, it's not to pour myself into another false narrative. It's to say to the divine one, to the divine reality that holds the divine wisdom, that holds all reality and all purpose, and knows all the pluses and minuses and all the potential paths and all the potential pitfalls, that hold the divine wisdom that holds everything. It's to say to that, I give myself to thee unreservedly, absolutely. Use me, make use of me. And so to the point where there is no me and thee anymore. In the Tirumantram, it says, when we lose, I don't know if I'll remember the quote exactly, but it's something like, why speak of me and you? It's something like that in Tirumantram, this Tamil text. Why speak of me and you? In the love of the divine, all sense of separation dissolves, and there is no more me and you. Self-offering. And so knowing that self-offering is an aspect of the state of subjective bhakti, and knowing that we are progressing on a path toward that state, we can lean into that. We can do what we're ready for. We don't need to push ourselves or feel bad about what we're not ready for, but we can do what we're ready for when it comes to self-offering and forgiveness and generosity and honoring the earth and giving back. We can take a look at our lives and see the places in which we're holding back, places in which we're afraid, and we can work the edge a little bit. Okay, is there a little more openness that's possible here? Is there a little more openness that I can allow in my life? A little more generosity, a little less holding, a little less self-protection. Where's my edge? Where's my edge? What more can I offer in this moment, in the shape of my life? And we work the edges, and this is the path. And the practices of bhakti, like remembering the divine, reading divine texts, singing to the divine, worshiping the divine, praying, meditating. These practices support our progress along the path and give us reminders and allow the light to come in. Allow the light to come in. It's like opening the window and allowing the light to come in to illuminate the places in our lives where things might be a little bit different, where we might open up a little bit more. So the practices support the path that leads to the state. And when we have a sense of what that state is, when we've considered it, and when we've imagined it, when we've even tried to touch it in an embodied experiential way, so it's not just an idea, then we have a sense of how to lean, how to be in those practices, how to nurture that path, because we know where we're going. And I think we're back at the beginning. We've come full circle. Yoga is a path. Yoga is a set of practices. Bhakti is a set of practices that supports movement along a path toward a state of being. And all of life, as Sri Aurobindo says, is yoga. Nothing's left out. Every minute, every breath, every action, every thought, every interaction, every relationship, everything is yoga. And we're all growing together. It's not just me on my own path working that out. We're all growing together, whether we know it or not. And whatever we think about our life and the purpose of our life, those limitations of thought have no impact on our capacity to actually grow, because the earth is waking up. And there's no, we aren't separate from that. We are the earth's awakening, and it's happening.